Hello everyone, welcome to the next video. We are now in Chapter 4, having skipped over Chapter 3 for the moment. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 really are both the heart and soul of programming, at least in as far as you know at this point. You learned much of this last year in Python and Visual Basic, so what we'll do now is start to look at how you do these basic things in C++. So we'll start off, as you see at the top. My program is Chapter 4 notes on if statements. So we're going to talk about if, else if, else, ands, ors, nested, all of those things. So let's just start with something rather basic. We will start with creating a variable. I'm going to use the examples from the book. I'll say let's define a variable grade, as in your percentage grade. And then I will say cout, please enter the student's percent grade. Take notice here, not to do with if statements, but with C and cout, just to remind you, you can't do a cin prompt. You have to do cout and then follow with a cin. And I'm doing it on the same line. Notice that I don't have an end out here. That way, when I do this, it's going to end up being on that same line. Does any of that really have any big consequence? No, of course not. I'm just showing you. So let's start off with what's known as a single selection statement. And that would be simply, is the condition true? And that's all. Is the condition true? In this case, what you're looking at would be simply one little if statement, nothing fancy about it. If the grade is greater than or equal to a 70, well, then congratulations, you passed. As you've seen, and this all should be a review, you do not need to have any braces after this. The student has passed. You know, if you're doing something very simplistic like that. So to expand upon that, if I have a double selection statement, you have, is this condition true or false? You want to determine both paths. Here, if the student had a 70 or more, they're going to have this printed out. If they put in 50, 60, 12, whatever, anything less than 70, it will not print anything at all. So if I do if the grade is greater than or equal to 70 again, but here I have cout, the student has passed, to determine that again. I then put the keyword else, and notice how if and else they both turn the pinkish purplish color to tell you it's a keyword. So this Boolean will be true and it'll print this, or else it will print false. Cout, the student has failed. So in that way, you're making two different determinations, not just one, but also the other. Before we get to the Elseif, I want to show you a special shortcut that you can do in some upper level languages like C++. Java also has this. We talk about what's called the conditional operator. It is $:colon. So is this ever something that you absolutely need to do? No, I'm just showing you a little shortcut. You're going to see this come up in a couple of pieces of code that you're going to see from here on out. So just to take a very quick detour, most operators are binary operators. The prefix bi, like bicycle, it means two. Like a bicycle has two wheels. Binary, there's two digits. And so if you have something like plus is known as a binary operator. Operator just means symbol because there's something on the left and there's something on the right. There's two operands. That is a binary operator. There's two operands. The unary operators, like if you think about unicycle, there's one wheel. Something like x++, X++ is, again, is what's called a unary operator. There's only one operand. You only have one thing with the operator, with the symbol. So there's only one X. There's only one operand. So the reason I'm mentioning these two things is because the only ternary operator, you think tricycle, you think 3, the only ternary operator is the question mark colon. It has 3 operands. How does it work? It's a shortcut if-else. Let me show you how it works, and then we will go back to kind of do the notes with it. If I say cout, parenthesis, grade, greater than or equal to 70. So I'm doing the same thing over and over again, I know, but at least it's, important repetition here. Question mark, quote, passed, colon failed. Right? So where are the 3 operands? Well, here you have the Boolean condition. Is this true or false? After the question mark, you have the second operand. You have, is it true? So if that's greater than or equal to 70, it'll print passed. Else, it'll print failed. This is the third operator, is the false condition. So this one line can take the shortcut place of this block. Again, just like plus plus, like do you ever have to use plus plus? No, you could say x equals x plus 1. Do you ever have to type this? No, you can say it the long way. And most often we will. There's certain things you can't do with this. It's most often used just to print things. I wanted to show it to you because the book introduces it in this chapter, and I just would like to do so because it doesn't really fit anywhere else. So again, the way that this works is you have the true, false Boolean condition before the question mark. After the question mark, it's like the then. If the true, false, then this is the true thing, and then colon, and then after that would be the false thing, for lack of a better word. So 1, 2, 3 different operands. And of course, you can also put an endl on here to skip a line down, and there we go. So we've done single, we've done double, and these are both under the umbrella of double. The final one would be the Elseif. The Elseif would be a multiple decision. A multiple selection statement. I'm having a really hard typing. This is when you have if, Elseif, else. You might remember back in Python you had elif. It's Elseif. You just spell the whole thing out. And in fact, let me make it proper. Else if you're going to do 2 different words here. It's not combined. It's else if. So what does this look like? Well, let's do letter grades. A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C, D, F. It's easier to do this in person than it is on a recording. So if I do if, the grade is greater than or equal to 70, then see out that they have a D grade. And else if grade is greater than or equal to, I believe it's 76. That would be, or no, I'm sorry, it's a 77, 78? I don't know. Let's go with 77 just to split the difference. Let's just pretend I know what I'm talking about on occasion here. So before I go any deeper, you might recall talking about this in the past. The order of these statements really matters because only one of them can be true and it'll skip the rest. Okay, meaning when you do if and else if this is true, it won't bother doing anything below it. So the thing is, if you put in that you have a 95, this is true. Like a 95 is bigger than 70. So this is worthless because it overlaps with this. It's not going to happen because of the order of these things. So we always talk about the order of Elseifs in terms of the most quote-unquote complicated condition comes first, and then you go down from there. The analogy I like to use is if you're playing cards, for those of you that know, like hands of poker. A full house has three of a kind and a pair. You get both of them, you have a full house. Like, for example, you have 3 sixes and 2 jacks. That's a full house. Well, if you do your if statement for 3 of a kind up here, but then you do your full house down here, it'll never trigger because 3 of a kind takes place there. It's like an overlapping Venn diagram. So we always want to make sure that we do them in that order. Meaning, I don't want to do FD, I don't want to do DC first. I want to do the hardest one, which would be an A. If I put in a 93, that's an A. And then an 86 would be a B. Okay. Now, we haven't done ands and ors yet, so thinking about these things, if you have a 95, it'll do this and skip the rest. So the fact that there's no upper bound right here, like the fact that I don't have and the grade is less than or equal to 92, that's okay, because we already know that's not a true statement, so it'll do this one. You really have to think about how you lay these if statements and else ifs and elses out to make sure that the conditions don't overlap in any way. That's why else if is so important, because if I were to do just a plain old if, like if this, those are just multiple single selections. And if I have that setup, if I have print an A, if you have a 95, well then 95 is still bigger than 86, so I'll print both. So that's how we want to use these things in coordination with each other. We want to make sure that we're doing these in the order of precedence. And so if I put in the first 4 letter grades, of course, the final letter grade is failure. You already have A, B, C, D. Well, there's a couple ways I can do this. I could say, else if the grade is less than 70, then C out an F and L, and that'll work perfectly fine. Even if they put in like a 0, it's an F. If they put in negative something, that's an F. I guess technically you're still failing if you get a negative score. But there are no other grades besides A, B, C, D, F. And so in that case, you can use just an else in conjunction with an else if. You just take off everything except for the else. And that will then give you all 5 letter grades. 93 or above, 86 or above. And we did it in the order of precedence. A on top and so forth. Again, had we reversed that, it would be a mess. So you want to think about those things when you do your if statements. Well, something you may not have thought about with this if and else if stuff now or in the past, the reason it's else if, you can think of this as selections with else and then if. It's hard for me to describe, and I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. I'm just going to use what's in the textbook to show you what I'm talking about. So if you look at this right here, this is really what it means to have an else if, you're saying, and this is in pseudocode, which we talked about in the first live session this week. You have the if statement, and then there's the conclusion there. If this condition is true, then do this. Else. So then after the else, you're saying, okay, well, this is the true part. If that's not true, then do one of these other things. So you see how it's else and then this one. And if it's not this one, else, then it's this one, else, then it's this one. And then if it doesn't fall under any of those categories, then it must be an F. There's nothing else left. Which, again, this is pseudocode. If you look down at the actual code, you can still think of the code we wrote like this. No, that they use the 10-point scale. I use the CV scale. But if there's a statement true, false, it'll do that. Else, if, and so on. Just kind of food for thought. Final couple things we will talk about. We mentioned this previously, the nested if statements, and just the understanding that with the if, the else if, the else, you can nest all of these things. Now, you know, it's kind of complicated. You gotta keep it in order. But yeah, let's do something like this. If the grade is greater than or equal to 93, we know they have an A, so see out, you know, A once again. But then let's say, you know, we're talking about somebody who's really precocious. You also want to have in there, what if they have over 100%? If they have an A, you could put in something like, you know, great work for getting over that 100% threshold. If you put the else if or the else, you want to make sure it doesn't dangle. In other words, you want to put it with the thing that would be the opposite, the false condition. If I were to put the else here, understand that I'm talking about the false part of the 100%, not the false part of the 93. That's why the braces matter. That's why the indentation matters. Again, to kind of keep these things orderly, keep them straight. It's easy to forget, you know, where's the opening and closing braces. You want to keep them in line with each other. So if I put the else there, it's with that. If I were to put the else here, now it's with this. So it does really matter where you place these things. At the end here, let me rewind a little bit because I wanted to make sure I showed you everything that was like the good way to do it, but I also want to make sure I go back and talk about some of the things that could go wrong. I want you to take notice that at the end of every single if statement, no semicolon, no semicolon. At the end of the else, there's no semicolon, no semicolon. That's because this is the statement terminator, and this is really like saying if the grade is greater than or equal to 100, well, what comes next? Now, what comes next is the then. This is the then, so really it's like saying if this, and then end it. Even when the else, you have else what? Else, print out an F, then end it. You never want to put a semicolon at the end of an if statement, because if you do, if grade equals, I don't know, 78%, like on the nose, for some reason you want to see, like, did they get exactly 78%? If I put a semicolon here and then I say, see out, you got 78% and L. So the thing is, like, see how the spacing is a little bit weird? Well, it's because the computer thinks if the grade is equal to 78, then do nothing, because it thinks that's the end of it. And then it'll do this no matter what. Like, even if you have braces, you know, again, just to prove it to you, like, okay, there's the spacing, it looks great. If I try to run this, it's even saying there was a warning there. It popped up really quick. It said, warning, do you mean to do that? If I try and type 78, it's like, okay, wow, it says you got 78. So it looks like it works. But the problem is, if I type in anything, 89, it says you got 78. That's wrong. So never ever put a semicolon at the end of an if statement. It will greatly mess up your program. And then the final thing, and or. And. Let's just capitalize those. And or. All right. So the and in C++ is actually the ampersand, the two ampersands above the 7, the and symbol. Or are the vertical pipes, they're called. They're above the enter key. Do shift backslash. It makes that. So for this one, let me just make two new variables quick. If I say like int a equals 5, int b equals 7, let's say, for example. So here's how it works. If a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 0, then cout your numbers are both positive. And down. So in order for and to be true, both of those must be true. The and is that they are both true. The or is only one or the other or both are true. If I do if A is greater than 0 or B is greater than 0, see out at least one of your numbers is positive. And L. Now, they're both positive, so it's still going to print this. If I were to change this to a -7, this one would no longer print. This one still would because that is a positive number. And we'll do more with the ands and the ors in the future, but I want to at least introduce that here with the if statement so that you can kind of use all of the tools at your disposal. You have if, else, and now you have and or. Our next video we'll be talking about while loops, which are not selection statements, but they're repetition statements. But they're still similar to if statements in that they're related. They look at a Boolean statement. So, thanks a lot. Take care. This is the end of the video.